My name's Daniel Colson. I'm with Keller Williams here in Missoula, Montana, and I'm on the phone with Geoff Feiss with the Telecommunications Association. How you doing, Geoff?
Great, Dan. Good to talk to you.
Awesome. I'm really excited about this. When I went to you guys' broadband communications meeting here in Missoula, the Conquering Montana's Divide. It's just something that's really actually been on my heart for a while, being growing up in Missoula, and ever since getting the internet for the first time back in '95, having that dial tone.
Yeah,
amazing.
That's right. You've been around. I remember having working for Michigan Bell and I had an Apple computer, one of the very first desktop computers.
Nice.
Got used to the internet about the same time in the early '90s. That was new stuff.
Yeah, my dad brought home a computer in '95. I remember he plugged it into the phone, and he'd look up a website, just type in a name, and we'd come and eat dinner. And then by the time dinner was done, we'd go over and we'd have the website up, and we could just read it, and it was all word and text. But it was like that. It was just you're blown away by it. You're like, oh, this is so cool. I'm looking at a website from another state, another country, and yeah, it was pretty awesome. But remember it like it was just yesterday. It was pretty crazy. But things have changed quite a bit, huh?
Indeed, and when you think about it, it's really not that terribly long ago.
I know.
And was it this year that the iPhone was celebrated its 10th anniversary? So that's 2006.
Yeah.
So, and you think about how dramatically the iPhone changed our world, and it's only 10 years ago.
I know, man. Just to think about how fast things are moving. This is awesome. Well, if you would, could I just hear a little bit about your background and how you got started in the Montana Telecommunications Association and this project specifically?
Sure. I started out of high school, or not high school, but college, as an intern on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., and got into the public policy arena immediately thereafter. It turned into a job for a couple of congressmen, and that then turned into a job in downtown D.C. working for the American Electronics Association. And then I was hired by Michigan Bell to represent them, and I moved to Detroit, but still spent most of my time in Washington, D.C. As a federal public policy jock, otherwise known as a lobbyist.
Nice.
And then joined, after one thing or another, joined the U.S. Telecom Association in D.C. So I left Detroit, went back to D.C., but still doing pretty much the same stuff, telecommunications policy, legal analysis, and communications and other activities representing the telecommunications industry. And then that turned into a job about 18 years ago out here in Montana representing the rural telecommunications providers of Montana, of whom there are about 12, and 9 of them are members of the Montana Telecommunications Association. So I've been in the telecom policy arena for, I haven't even counted, 20, 25, 30 years, a while.
Wow. And that's a pretty big move going from, D.C., Detroit, and then all the way to Montana real quick. It's a pretty big move. What drew you out here?
It was an easy move. It's much easier to move from the big city to Montana.
Right.
At least it has been for me than it would be for me to move back. I've had opportunities to leave Montana and go back to a variety of positions in Washington and other cities around the country. I was even offered a job in a city in the Midwest that considers itself one of the most livable communities, and when it came down to the short straws, I said Montana, or do I really want to leave Montana? And the answer was no. I didn't, and won't. So it's a great. I'm only sad that it took me 40 years to discover Montana.
To discover it, wow. And was it your choice to come here, or was it you kind of sent here and then fell in love with it?
No, you're fading out.
Oh, were you sent here and fall in love with it, or did you actually look on a map and request to come out here? Or was it?
That's kind of a funny story. So my father and brothers have fly fished for as long as I can remember. I never did. I was a type A kind of guy and never had the patience to stand around and do nothing. It's what it seemed like at the time, and now I'm a fly fishing convert. It's bad. I can't really think about anything other than fly fishing. But my father invited me on a trip to Montana to float the Smith River, and fell in love with fishing and fell in love with Montana.
Wow.
And didn't know that 2 years later there would be an opportunity to run the Montana Telecom Association.
Well, awesome.
So when
really cool.
when that opportunity opened up, I was out of D.C. in a moment and never looked back.
Awesome. Jeez, that's really cool. Well, hey, moving to the program specifically, Conquering Montana's Divide, how many years has this been in the making? I know you guys just released it, or released the website and everything about 3 weeks ago, was it, or almost a month ago?
October 18th is when we launched that. So years in the making is a interesting question. So technically, it took us about 6 months of gathering data and putting the report together. But I'll interpret it more broadly and say, the kinds of accomplishments that we report in our broadband report have taken years and years in the making, and will continue to take years and years. So, for instance, one of the factoids that we have in the report is that the members of the Montana Telecommunications Association, the 9 companies, have invested $250 million in broadband infrastructure, mostly fiber optic backbone infrastructure, in the last 5 years alone. And that's just our 9 companies and just the last 5 years. The rate of expenditure is growing almost geometrically. We double the amount of bandwidth available every 18 months. And so, that's an ongoing continuum of investment and deployment. So while it took us 6 months to put the report together, it reports about years of accomplishment.
Wow. That's pretty cool. Well, about this, what geographical area in Montana do you think is really the focus? Where are you guys really wanting to focus and get a lot of that out there? I saw, when I look at the map, it looked like just northern Montana just had kind of where most of the stuff was going out there, out in the plains, northeastern Montana, I'd say. Mm-hmm. Is that kind of where it's going, or?
Are you talking about the investment that the rural telecom companies are making, Okay? No, we have the Montana Telecom Association members, and I'm just going to abbreviate that because there's too many syllables. I'll just say MTA. Nice. Cover the entire state. So we cover about over 100,000, closer probably to 120,000 square miles.
Yeah.
And that's 70 to 80% of the state. Actually, if you add us up with the large out-of-state companies that serve the more urbanized areas of Montana, you only get to about 90% of the state. And so you go, well, where's the other 10%? And the other 10% is wilderness, national parks, and wilderness areas that nobody serves and can't. So in any event, we serve about 70% of the populated part of the state, and it's very sparsely populated. In fact, fewer than 3 customers per square mile
I saw that,
on average live in the areas that we cover.
Wow.
However, we also have competitive subsidiaries that serve in places like Missoula and Great Falls and Bozeman with commercial services there too. But generally speaking, the MTA members are serving outside of Montana's urbanized areas, and we cover vast expanses, and it's north, south, east, west. So it's not just northern Montana. We have member companies in eastern Montana where the average population density is less than 1 per square mile. I mean, we have counties.
Yeah. I thought it was just below 1.
I've lived here, I moved here from Maryland, and I've lived here for 20 years, and it still astounds me that we have counties with like 500 people in the entire county.
Yep. Jeez. So, well, besides like population and those costs, well, how much does just the I guess the mountains, the terrain play a part? Is that something that really hinders getting that fiber in, or is
Absolutely.
it mainly just the population of the customers there that'll use it, or what's kind of the biggest hurdle you'd say?
No, that's a huge cost of deploying broadband infrastructure. And when we talk about deploying modern broadband infrastructure, we're mostly talking about fiber optic facilities. And so there are two major costs. Ironically, the cost of the fiber itself, the glass, and it's all of the encasements that it comes in is expensive, but it's way more expensive to trench lines into the ground, and our facilities are almost always buried. And in the Rocky Mountains, they don't call them Rocky Mountains for nothing.
Yeah, right.
It's solid granite, and that costs us on average, about $30,000 a mile just to dig a trench to lay the fiber in. That's before you buy the fiber, and that's before you light it up. And the equipment to light up the fiber is also expensive. So it's a very capital-intensive business, and it takes a lot of money and a lot of time to dig through a lot of rock to get fiber optic facilities to fewer than 3 people per square mile.
Wow. So
that's one of the things we actually talked about in the report. So it costs us $30,000 per mile, and that's a whole lot of money. And we compared that to Seattle, just because Seattle's a town that most people in Montana are familiar with. We could have picked Denver or anywhere else, and probably would have come up with about the same numbers. And in Seattle, for example, while it costs us $30,000 per mile to lay fiber backbone, it actually costs more in Seattle, up to like $100,000 for a mile of fiber. So you're going, whoa, that's, how is that? Well, they've got a lot of rights of way and pole attachments and fees and other costs that affect them. But when you then reduce that to customers served by that mile of fiber backbone, we have fewer than 3 customers per square mile on a average, and they have something like 6,000 or 8,000 people who can access a square mile of fiber backbone. And so when you do
$18 a person.
There you go.
I saw that.
$18 per customer served in Seattle versus $10,000 per customer served in Montana.
Jeez. So, well, on this, when people are, if somebody were to ask, is it worth getting this internet out to those people at those type of costs? What makes it worth it besides being able to connect, the families, the medical, the school? What really speaks to you just worth it, saying, hey, we need to get those people out there, even though there's a few of them, they need to have internet. They need to have communication, this ability to communicate.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head in your question. It's worth it, one, because these small companies, this is what they do. They provide telecommunications services to their consumers in rural Montana, and they provide the best services they can. Their customers are their neighbors, and they go to church and go shopping and live with their customers. So these rural telecommunications providers are highly in tune to their communities, and the more viable and active and vibrant their communities are, the better off the companies are. So it's a what do they call that? A circle, a virtuous cycle.
Nice.
When we serve our communities, and our communities serve us, and so it's and that's the way it is, and especially in rural communities and in a rural state like Montana.
And and with that, I saw that number which blew me away. Like, we're looking at having 100% of our schools served by 2017, where some of those in the higher densely populated cities only see 27%. That number really blew me away. I'm like, that's really interesting.
Yeah, so again, that's the MTA members have committed to deploying fiber to our schools. by the end of 2017, and that's just an example of how we take our commitment to our communities very seriously. And schools are generally anchor institutions that keep communities alive. If you don't have a school, it's hard to keep a community successful.
Right.
So that is one of what we call an anchor institution. And from there, we build our fiber out to other anchor institutions, and then further out into the more sparsely populated areas. And so that's just an indication of the kind of dedication and commitment and investment that these companies are making.
Oh, nice. Hey,
we have a great example actually in northwestern Montana, where one of MTA's member companies is deploying fiber to the home, and they've covered about 70% of their service area. The general manager up there got a call from, I think it was Washington. It was a city back east, from somebody who'd fallen in love with Montana and wanted to move to Montana, but he had a high-tech kind of intensive bandwidth job, and wanted to port his job to northwestern Montana and have the best of both worlds, where he could work on his tech job and live in northwestern Montana, but he wanted to make sure that he had the bandwidth he needed to conduct his job. Called the general manager. The general manager said, "Well, yeah, we got you covered." And he said, "Great, I'm out of here." So he now so there's a new resident in northwestern Montana who's happier than a clam with his bandwidth from a rural provider in northwestern Montana. And this kind of example is all over the place.
It is. It is. I couldn't believe the numbers. How many people work from home here in Montana and need
Montana's
that kind of stuff.
Ranked number one in telecommuting in the country.
Yeah, when I heard that number, I'm like, that's awesome. Very nice. Really cool. Well, when you've been doing this stuff, when you've been pushing this internet out to these communities, to these other counties, have you ever met pushback from any communities where they don't want this kind of stuff? Or is it pretty much just generally just widely accepted, get in here as fast as you can, we want
it? Generally, people like to drive faster cars.
Exactly.
So no, we haven't ever gotten any complaints.
Cool.
We try to stay ahead of the demand curve. So we know that demand for bandwidth is increasing.
Right.
And we're trying to build our networks to be ahead of that demand curve. That said, there is sort of a subcurrent where the need for speed is overrated in some cases. So we actually hear from occasionally that we have all the bandwidth we need. And so if people are, for instance, you see a lot of these municipal areas around the country are saying, we want to become a gigabit city, and if we are, then then that will help economic development, and we'll get more jobs, and more companies will locate here if we're a gigabit city. But studies actually find out that a gig is a very rarely used. Let me put it that way. So there have been a number of studies lately that saying, yes, bandwidth and broadband capabilities and access to it is extremely important. It's a critical element in any city or any community's economic development model. But it is not the be-all and end-all. You still need good education, good infrastructure. You need to have a location that people want to be in. And so there is a lot of hype around, being the fastest broadband available. And actually, some cities are spending taxpayer money to overlay broadband networks. And it turns out, gee whiz, they've spent all this taxpayer money, and other things don't work out, and so they end up holding the bag for a lot of money that they spent on a redundant network that people find that doesn't have sufficient use. And so there is that hype going around about, geez, everybody needs a gig in every garage.
Right.
Well, no. But that said, broadband access is extremely important to community development, and the broadband providers of Montana are there.
Well, nice. Well, one of my big questions I really wanted to find out, what do you guys do while building these networks to ensure that the next big thing that comes along in communications is easily put in there? Like, say, before we were communicating through the copper, now it's fiber. What if the next big thing comes out? Is it just going to be, hey, we got to start from scratch, now we got to tear out the fiber and put this new wazoo line in? Or is it how it's being built? Is it something that, hey, we can easily change it out if technology, because you know how fast technology changes. Well, in the next 10 years, is this fiber still going to be the thing we're using and loving?
Yeah. So right now we don't foresee a replacement for fiber. That doesn't mean it won't happen. And there was the tin can and string, and then there was copper, and then there was fiber. And so there are two different general business approaches to replacing copper with fiber. One is to dig the stuff up and put fiber in. The other is to take fiber further out in your network so that the copper loops are shorter and you can get very high speed, close to gigabit speeds on copper, on short copper loops.
Nice.
So it's really expensive, as I mentioned before, to dig up dirt and put in copper or conduit for fiber or anything. The digging up the dirt is the expensive part, and so we don't anticipate digging up dirt where we have fiber in ground. We do dig up copper plant to replace it with fiber. Usually, as the copper plant ages, we're pushing fiber out to make that copper loop shorter. So, and the copper, once the copper's in the ground, it's good for 20 years or more. So in 20 years, will there be something other than fiber? Possibly, but fiber is virtually limitless in the amount of bandwidth it can carry.
And once you're going at the speed of light, do you really need to go faster, right?
So what they're doing, you send fiber, you send light down fiber, so that travels at the speed of light.
Oh, yeah.
So you don't get any faster than the speed of light, at least I don't think so. And what they're doing now is multiplexing a single light wave. So, you look at your color spectrum, and it goes from whatever it does. I'm not an artist. It goes from my wife is, and so she would be embarrassed if I don't know what the color spectrum is. But I think it goes from like yellow to blue or something like that, and there's different shades all in there. Well, they take yellow and then they divide that up into like 1,000 shades of yellow. Wow. Each shade has its own code, if you will. So you can divide up the light waves in a fiber almost infinitely, and so we don't anticipate a replacement for fiber as a transmission medium. Wow. There is. People might ask, what about wireless? I mean, isn't wireless taking over the world? And yes and no. So wireless speeds are limited, and wireless spectrum is limited. There's, in fact, spectrum in the cities is extremely valuable because it's being fully used, and the speed that you use over wireless is limited, although it's getting faster and faster. And then the transmission capabilities of wireless spectrum are limited too. Some, depending on what the frequencies are, it doesn't go through mountains or buildings or even glass. So it all depends on where your spectrum is, and that becomes more limited. The lower the spectrum frequency, the more valuable it is, and that's limited. And then I should point out that all of that wireless technology connects to a wireline backbone.
Yep.
So your cell phone call, is wireless from your cell phone to the nearest tower, and then that tower is connected usually to fiber or other broadband facilities. And so, once again, the broadband infrastructure is critical to broadband accessibility.
Well, that's perfect. You answered my very next question about wireless. That's awesome. Well, nice. Well, yeah, this is just a great program reading through it, and I love your guys' website. It's broadbandmt.com.
There you go.
Yeah,
broadbandmt.com.
Yeah, and it just answered all your questions. Just go on it, and I just read through the the 2016 State of Rural Broadband Report. Very well done. Awesome, great information.
Terrific.
So,
We even have a little video, animated video there. It's a 2.5 minute show, and it sort of summarizes everything.
Everything, yeah, it's just perfect. And I'm going to have links to all this when I post this this conversation. I'll just have links to everything.
Terrific.
So I'll try and push it out to everyone. Everyone should know about this
kind
of stuff that's
good.
happening.
And I think I should know this since I was involved so deeply with it. I think broadbandmt.com has a connection to the Montana Telecommunications Association and me. But let me just give you my number if you have any clients or folks who are interested in moving to Montana. Welcome to Montana in advance, and thanks for your help, Dan. And my number, if anybody needs to find me, is 406-442-4316.
4316. Awesome. Well, hey, thank you so much for talking with me, Geoff, for giving me this time and just updating me on this very valuable information. This is a great project, and I hope you guys all the best and things run smoothly with it. And
thanks for your interest and your support of Montana, and good luck to you, and it's been my pleasure.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Geoff. I'll talk to you later.
See ya.
Bye.